Unexpectedly, Peyton Manning, the two-time Super Bowl champion, Hall of Famer, and one of the most respected quarterbacks in NFL history, has stepped into an entirely new arena, one that few could have predicted, but many are now celebrating. This time, however, he's not holding a football or reading a defensive line. Instead, he's reading the future, and it's female. In a move that stunned the sports world and energized an entire community, Manning announced his official role as co-owner of the newest National Women's Soccer League, NWSL, expansion team based in Denver, Colorado. While some may have initially seen the headline as a simple business venture, those familiar with Manning's legacy recognized the deeper significance immediately. This wasn't just a financial move, it was a statement. A quarterback known for elevating teams, leading dynasties, and commanding locker rooms had chosen to throw his influence behind women's sports. Not just with applause, but with ownership. The announcement, delivered via a sleek promotional video and a heartfelt press release, quickly went viral. Manning stood on a soccer field in a crisp suit flanked by young female athletes and longtime community leaders, stating with sincerity that the future of sport must be inclusive, and Denver's future must include women at the forefront. The message resonated far beyond football fans. Advocates for gender equity in sports applauded his choice, not only for its symbolic weight, but for the tangible resources and visibility it brings to a league that has long fought for recognition, respect, and resources. This was Peyton Manning, the face of American football, backing women's soccer in a city that had been hungry for professional representation in the sport. His decision tapped into a broader movement already building momentum across the country, as athletes, entertainers, and investors increasingly recognize the NWSL not as a niche interest, but as one of the fastest-growing and most exciting sports leagues in America. Denver, a city steeped in athletic culture but missing a women's professional soccer presence, reacted with immediate enthusiasm. Local media hailed it as a historic moment. Community leaders called it a dream realized. And fans, they began flooding social media with name suggestions, jersey concepts, and countdowns to kickoff. For Manning, this move marked the start of a new chapter, one defined not by touchdowns or quarterback ratings, but by impact, investment, and legacy beyond the gridiron. And for the city of Denver, it signaled something even greater: the dawn of a movement where female athletes are no longer an afterthought, but the main event. Almost immediately, Manning's decision to enter the NWSL ownership space was met with both widespread celebration and a wave of questions that revealed the complexities of his new role. While sports pundits praised the headline, deeper voices within the women's sports community raised a critical eye, not at his presence, but at what his involvement would mean structurally, culturally, and financially for the league. Would this be a symbolic gesture, or would Manning truly embed himself in the mission of advancing women's sports on their own terms? Skeptics pointed to a long history of high-profile men investing in women's leagues with good intentions, only to remain distant when real challenges surfaced. Issues like equitable pay, facilities, media coverage, and year-round infrastructure support. These questions didn't arise in a vacuum. They came from experience, from players who had fought tooth and nail for legitimacy while often receiving only performative backing from those in power. And then there was the financial piece. The NWSL, despite its growth, still operates on budgets far smaller than those of its male counterparts. Manning's resources and influence were welcome, but would his involvement shift control away from those who had been building the league with grit and vision for years? Would his voice amplify existing leadership or unintentionally overshadow it? His name carried power, yes, but power, if not checked by understanding and humility, could upend hard-earned progress. Beyond the league, some questioned whether Denver, for all its enthusiasm, was prepared to support this new team with the same fervor it had given to its men's franchises. Would fans show up after the novelty wore off? Would local sponsors invest with the same urgency? Or was this simply another feel-good announcement that might fizzle once the season began? In the press, narratives diverged. Traditional outlets framed the news as a win for the league, while independent journalists highlighted the need for accountability. Within days, think pieces emerged. Is Peyton the ally women's soccer needs? Manning joins the club, now what? The tension was real, not because anyone doubted his goodwill, but because women's sports have too often been used as image tools for powerful men, rather than platforms for genuine equity and shared growth. Yet through all this, Manning remained publicly steady. He began meeting with community stakeholders, sitting in on NWSL operations briefings, and speaking directly with current and former players, not as a savior, but as a student. Privately, he expressed to close colleagues that he knew he had more to learn than to lead, and that his role wasn't to dictate, but to support. Still, the skepticism lingered, and rightfully so. This was no longer just about bringing a team to Denver, It was about proving that his presence wouldn't dilute the mission, but deepen its roots. Inside the league, some execs quietly admitted that while the exposure Manning brought was invaluable, they too were watching carefully. Because in a sport where every inch of progress has been hard-won, no one wanted to see control wrested away from those who had fought for the foundation. The conflict, then, wasn't between good and bad. It was between intention and execution. Peyton Manning had stepped into a powerful story already being written by women. The question now was whether he would simply read a line or help turn the page with respect, vision, and humility. Then, a shift began to take shape, not in headlines, but in the locker rooms, boardrooms, and community centers of Denver, where the impact of Manning's involvement started revealing itself in concrete, undeniable ways. What began as cautious optimism and guarded hope soon transformed into real momentum, as Manning moved beyond symbolic gestures and into the trenches of development. He attended youth clinics across the city, not as a celebrity photo op, but as a mentor, often staying long after the cameras left to speak with players, coaches, and parents. He brought in local high school teams to tour the club's future facilities, giving them front-row access to the infrastructure being built. And when asked about marketing strategies, Manning insisted that player stories, not his fame, should drive the branding of the team. The team's new general manager, a former NWSL player herself, reported that Manning had backed every decision she made, even when it challenged conventional approaches. His message was clear: "This is your team. I'm just here to help build it right." Soon after, Denver's ownership group, with Manning as its most recognizable face, launched an unprecedented initiative in the league. A multi-million-dollar investment in player housing, mental health resources, and maternity support policies, areas often overlooked in professional women's sports. The announcement sent ripples through the league, with players from other franchises publicly voicing admiration and, in some cases, envy. Manning didn't make himself the face of these changes. He deferred to the women leading the initiatives, giving them the stage and the resources they needed to make lasting change. The local response in Denver grew stronger. Season ticket sales shattered expectations, merchandise flew off shelves, corporate partners lined up, not just to be associated with Manning, but because they believed in the model being built. A sustainable, values-driven club rooted in equity and community. Then came the moment that crystallized it all. At the team's first major public event, a live unveiling of the club name and crest held downtown, Peyton Manning took the mic, briefly. He spoke only for 2 minutes. He thanked the city, the NWSL, the women who built the game, and then turned the stage over to the team's captain and coach, both of whom shared powerful stories of what the club already meant to them. It was a quiet, calculated moment. Manning could have commanded the spotlight. Instead, he handed it off. That choice did more than silence critics. It inspired transformation. Other high-profile figures began looking at the NWSL differently, not as a philanthropic token, but as a serious, innovative investment. And more importantly, as a space where leadership meant listening, not dominating. For Denver's team, morale soared. Players felt heard, staff felt empowered, and fans began seeing something rare in modern sports: a franchise that lived its values from the ground up. By the time the team played its first exhibition match, the stadium was full, the chants were loud, and a new culture had clearly taken root. Peyton Manning, through intention and action, had proven that legacy isn't just what you build for yourself. It's what you help others build when you finally step back and let them lead. Ultimately, the true impact of Peyton Manning's entry into the world of women's soccer wasn't measured in merchandise sales, viral moments, or even wins on the field. It was reflected in the quiet, persistent shift in how people began to view leadership, investment, and inclusion in sports. As the inaugural season of Denver's NWSL franchise unfolded, it became evident that Manning hadn't just joined a team. He had aligned himself with a movement. The organization, underpinned by the support of a city long hungry for representation in women's professional sports, began to stand as a model of what holistic, purpose-driven ownership could look like. Players praised the organization's commitment not just to their physical training, but to their mental and emotional wellness, something that had historically taken a backseat in elite competition. Local schools began integrating the team into their curriculum, inviting players to speak about resilience, leadership, and equality. And across the league, conversations shifted from how to keep women's sports afloat to how to strategically grow them with intention and respect. For Manning, this wasn't just about personal reinvention. It was a maturation of his public identity. Once known for his precision passes and locker room leadership, he now became a symbol of what it means to use influence responsibly. He didn't just fund change, he followed it. He listened more than he spoke, empowered those who knew the terrain, and allowed himself to be guided by values, not vanity. That integrity did not go unnoticed. The league awarded Denver's club a special recognition for its innovation in community engagement, and a national publication named Manning one of the most influential figures in women's sports, not for what he represented as a man, but for how he supported those around him without taking over. Meanwhile, a broader ripple effect was underway. Other male athletes, across football, basketball, and even combat sports, began inquiring about how they could support women's leagues in their hometowns. And unlike the past, they weren't looking for headline placements. They were asking how to build advisory boards, fund development programs, and learn from the women already doing the work. In interviews, Manning consistently credited the people around him. He deflected praise and directed attention toward his co-owners, his staff, and most of all, the athletes who put in the work every day on the field and in the community. As Denver's new team became more than just a franchise, becoming a touchstone for equity, inclusion, and excellence, the narrative around Manning evolved from one of curiosity to one of admiration. He didn't just invest in women's sports, he elevated them without centering himself. And that, in today's media-driven world, was revolutionary. In the end, Peyton Manning's greatest pass wasn't on a football field. It was a handoff to women ready to lead, to communities ready to grow, and to a future in sports that looks far more inclusive, equitable, and inspiring than the one he inherited. He understood, perhaps better than most, that legacy isn't about being remembered for what you did, but for what you empowered others to do when the spotlight turned elsewhere.